Well, hello there, this is Cool Dude Clem, also known as the Music Wizard. If I sound a bit scratchy right now, I'm recovering from yet another cold. I don't know why I get so many, but, you know, I seem to be immune to everything out there except the common cold. If anyone with a 100-mile radius even thinks about catching one, I'll catch it. Anyway, I thought it was about time to do the video about my bass instruments. So, just like every house needs a good, strong foundation to support the walls and the floors and everything, every song needs a good, solid foundation to support the chords, the melody and the rhythm. And when I say bass, I'm not talking about cheesy synthetic sounds. I'm talking about samples of real stringed bass instruments. And when I say samples of real stringed bass instruments, I'm not talking about cheesy one-shot samples here like this. I'm looking at you, hip-hop producers. No, I'm talking about sampled instruments with multiple sampled notes, multiple articulations, so not only just the standard ordinary notes, but other things as well, such as staccatos, slides, falls, multiple round robins, and even hard and soft velocity layers. You know, playing loud or quiet. Now, this sample pack isn't just the same bass instrument and a bunch of presets to make it sound like different playing styles or a different instrument. You know, putting it through a bunch of effects to make it sound different. Because, to me, that doesn't sound like a different instrument. That just sounds like the same instrument played through a bunch of effects. So, in this sample pack, there are 8 different basses, each with their own characteristic sound, and you should be able to find something that fits whatever genre of music you're doing. The one thing you won't find is synthetic basses, because, well, to me, synthetic music just sounds cheesy and bleh, so string basses only. So the first bass instrument here is the upright bass, and this comes in both plucked and bowed variations. While the plucked version does have round robins, the bowed does not, but it still has multiple different articulations, so it still sounds good. Then there's the Fender Jazz Bass, which works in just about everything. In fact, I've used that in just about everything. A Hagstrom, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, a Hagstrom H8, which is like the bass version of a 12-string guitar. And then there's the Music Man Sabre, which is like, well, for all your slapping needs. Now those are the main 4 basses. There's also a few others, which we'll take a look at now. So, the ample bass, which I sampled from the Ample Sounds APBL, whatever it was, VST, along with all its different sounds. This one here called Bass Guitar, this is one that I accidentally included in this sample pack, because this was something I was experimenting with by playing low notes on my guitar, then pitching it down an octave to make it sound like a bass. I didn't know it was in there when I was zipping the files, but yeah, whatever. Moving on, there's P-Bass, which is a Fender Precision bass with long and short notes sampled. And last but not least, Sienna Bass, which was sampled from the VST of the same name. I think I should have put this one in the acoustic folder since it is an acoustic bass guitar, but yeah. Now those of you who are new here, maybe unfamiliar with the unconventional way that I sample most stringed instruments, or at least most of them anyway. So I'm going to load the Fender Jazz Bass in, and if we take a look at the samples, you can see that each sample here has 3 notes in it. So you might be asking yourself, why did I do that? Why is each note there 3 times? What's that all about? Well, if we just take a little listen to it. You hear that? You hear how each of those, although they're the same note, they sound slightly different? Well, that's what happens when a human being plays an instrument, and I've done my best to try to capture that. Of course, this is not going to sound as good as the real thing, but we can get pretty close. Now, these multiple instances of the notes are called round robins, but just to keep it simple, I'm going to be using the word instances because, well, that's just more easier to understand.
Instances.
Don't know where that came from.
I'm Sonic the Hedgehog.
Anyway, to keep this demonstration simple here, I have something here that just has 1 note sampled, so there's just 1 sample, but this sample has 3 instances of that particular note. So, if I just put a bass line in the normal way, nothing in the effects column, nothing in the volume column, then when you play it, only the first instance is going to be used, which is this area here, and that produces the dreaded machine gun effect. So the way around this is to use more than just that first instance. Now, this applies to just the Fender Jazz, the acoustic, the Hagstrom, and the Music Man Sabre. So to get the second instance of the note, which is this part, we use a sample offset of 014. And if we want the third instance, which is this last bit, a sample offset of 028. And of course, to get the first instance, you just leave it blank. And if we randomize what instance is going to play, so some notes get an offset of 014, and some get an offset of 028, and others get nothing, it can sound like this. But of course, because all these basses are multi-sampled, well, I'll load one in and it now sounds like this. Alternatively, you could set the sample cues to where each note starts and use those instead, as you can see from what I'm doing here. But this is quite a long and tedious process, and although OpenMPT tracker modules do save the sample cue positions, the ITI files themselves do not, although I really wish they did. Now, one thing I should mention is that, you know, that last note is a lot longer than the previous 2 notes. You know, if you go to the samples, you can see there's 2 short notes and 1 long note. And if you want the whole of that long note, you're going to want to disable the volume envelope. So I put the volume envelope in there, so when you're going through the sounds or when you're demoing them, it doesn't go d-d-d, because, you know, that can be a bit annoying. So that's why I put the volume envelopes in. So yeah, you just disable the volume envelope and use the 028 offset and you get the whole of that last note. Trouble is though, if you do disable the volume envelope, and I do recommend you actually do that, if you're using, say, the first instance of the note, it's now going to play the whole of that sample. So you'll get the first instance playing, then you'll hear the second instance, and then the third instance. So you're going to want to put a note off after the note so you don't hear 2 notes or 3 notes when you only want to hear 1. Another thing I should mention before we move on, I know you're going, but just bear with me. I just want to do a little bit of a PSA here, and that is, don't use an offset of 0, and think that's going to give you the first instance of the note, because if you do that, and I've made this mistake, it will just reuse whatever the last offset was, and you're going to wonder what the hell's gone wrong. So like I mentioned before, when you want the first instance, just leave that blank. Plus, that leaves that open to put any other effect in there you want. One final thing I think I should mention, I know, while the normal notes and staccatos have multiple instances, the slides don't. There's just one instance of each note. When it comes to the short things, such as the smacks and the ghost notes and the stop noises, while they do have multiple instances, rather than putting a bunch of those all into one sample, which would be rather wasteful, they've got their own individual samples, so one sample for each noise, and each one of those is mapped to a different note. So a C5 is going to give you the first one, a C sharp 5 is going to give you the second one, a D5 is going to give you the third one, and so on. And there's about 4 to 8 of those in each one of those files. So this all applies for the Fender Jazz, the acoustic, the Hagstrom, and the Music Man Sabre, but it's a bit different for the other basses. I don't know why, but when I breathe in to say something on my videos, the breathing is always super loud, so I thought I'd really do it loud. But anyway, as you can see, we have 4 other basses here. Why am I talking like that? But like I said, there's 4 other basses here, so got ample bass, and guitar bass, P bass, and Sienna bass. So start with the one that says ample bass 00224466. If you're wondering what that means, well, the 22, the 44, and the 66 refer to what sample offset you need to get the different instances of the notes, because these have 4 of them. So yeah, 22 will give you the second instance, which is this bit here. 44 will give you the third instance, which is this part, and 66 will give you the final instance, which is this part here. And like I've stated so many times before, for the first instance of the note, you just leave it blank. Alternatively, you could use sample cues, and because this has like a note off noise at the end of each note, if that makes sense, you can even have additional sample cues where the note ends to get those note off sounds. So next I want to talk about the slaps. So these 2 files obviously are slap bass or slap bass, whatever you want to call it, and there's only 2 instances of the notes in this case, and the 44 is referring to what sample offset you need to get the second instance of the notes. Finally, before moving on from the ample bass stuff, there's the slides and all the other weird noises. Now, there's 4 of these each, and just like the other basses I talked about, they're mapped to different notes. So C5 gives you the first one, C#5 gives you the next one, and D5 gives you the third one, and D#5 gives you the fourth. I'm so tired right now, but I just want to end this voiceover, so I'm just going to wing it. So the next thing to talk about is, well, guitar bass, which is that experimental one that I mentioned some time ago. Well, this one is done like the other basses was, with 3 instances of each note. However, they're not synced to any kind of sample offset or sample cues. I just played the notes for however long I felt was good enough. Like I said, this was like an experimental thing which I didn't intend to include, but it got in there. So with this, you will need to set up the sample cues. I mean, if ITI files actually say the sample cue positions, I would have done that myself, but they don't. So instead, every time you load up an ITI file, you just get the default sample cue position. So that, yeah, you will need to manually set those up every time you load this. On the plus side though, since every note is here, from being plucked to being stopped, you can set up additional sample cue positions to get those note being stopped sounds, whatever you want to call them. Finally getting to the end of it now. So this one called P-Bass is just samples of a Fender Precision bass, but with long and short notes. And this time the round robins or instances, whatever you want to call them, are in separate files. So yeah, no need to mess around with sample cues or sample offsets in this case. It's not the best, I know, but you know, it's there if you need it. And lastly, but not least, the Sienna bass, which is, like I said, it's a big acoustic bass guitar. Again, the round robins are separate. There's 2 instances of each note, and again, they're in separate files. The slaps, well, that's not slap bass, that's like, you know, smacking it for additional percussion sounds. And there's 7 of those, and they're mapped from the notes C5 to F#5. So, yep, I'm really fatigued now, and I'm gonna stop this before I collapse over the microphone. So until next time, goodbye. Oh, never mind. Too late.